So my name is NOEMI Ocampo. I come from Yakima, Washington, so the eastern side of the state. And I used to go to A.C. Davis High School. A little bit about Davis. The student population is about 3,000 students. It's a 4A school, so we have a pretty big, pretty good sized school. Demographic of the school itself, you can say about 75% of them are Hispanic, about 24 are white, and 1% are other. So on the diversity scale, we are not very diverse. There's a lot of Hispanic and a lot of white. That's what usually it comes down to. But on the other hand, the staff demographic is completely different. The staff is about, you can say 10% Hispanic, 1% other, and about 89% white. So even though the majority is Hispanic students, the staff itself is white. So even because of that, there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of stereotypes. A lot of students have to face. And it truly does affect someone. So common stereotypes that I faced two different kinds of stereotypes. I face what I call the social stereotype and the domestic stereotype. So the social stereotypes that I have to face are basically three things, which is I'm a female, I'm Hispanic, and I go to public school. Knowing those three things, the most stereotypes I have to face is that I'm going to be a dropout, I'm going to get pregnant by the age of 15, and that I'm basically going to become a gangster. Those stereotypes don't affect me as much as the ones I have to face at home, just because ever since elementary school I've been exposed to them. So I'm at a point where I'm, what you can say, numb to those stereotypes. People can say what they want. It doesn't affect me as much. When I walk down the street, I always get looks of, oh, who is she? I walk into a store and they always follow me around because they think I'm going to steal something. But those don't bother me as much as the stereotypes I get at home. The stereotypes I get at home, believe it or not, a lot of them, they're from my family. A lot of people don't think that within a family there's discrimination, but there is. Mostly because, one, I'm a girl, and two, my legal status. So I'm a legal female. To the eyes of a lot of my family, I'm not Mexican, I'm American, because I'm born in this country. But to people at school, I'm a Mexican and I'm not American. So I always had that trouble to figure out where I really truly belong, just because when I'm at home, I'm not Mexican enough, and when I'm at school, I'm not American enough. So that's one of the biggest struggles I've had to face throughout my whole childhood. But the two main ones are obviously that I'm a girl and that I'm legal. In a Hispanic being, or how should I say, in Hispanic culture, the females are viewed as they should be at home, they shouldn't study, they need to clean the house, they need to cook. So everything what a female should do, be a house mom, etc. But being in America and being legal, you're set to a whole different other standard. When I'm legal, I have to go to school, I have to get good grades. I'm held to a higher expectation of you have your papers, so you should be able to accomplish anything you want. Even though they don't know that I go through the same struggles of even my brother who's not legal. Just because I have my papers and he doesn't mean that we go through different systems. Yeah, of course, there's some advantages I have over him, of course, like, for example, financial aid. I can get financial aid as well he can't. In that aspect, I do see how I have the advantage. Another aspect of going through the same application process, it's the same thing. But in my parents' eyes, it's different. It should always be easier for me. So those two stereotypes, or those two different kinds of discriminations, like, they clash within themselves. I'm expected to be home and clean the house and do all the housework, yet at the same time I have to be able to finish all my homework and be able to accomplish this big idea of what they have for me, which really sometimes it doesn't make sense even for them. Other stereotypes I face with, are not stereotypes, more of other discrimination I clash with my family is the liberty of being who you are. Throughout the years, I've met a lot of different people, and I've tried to find myself who I really am. I found out that even though my parents say that you shouldn't care what people think of you or what people think, it's a big part of how the family is viewed. So when people say that you're gay, my family obviously does not take it very well. When I had a friend that identified as bisexual and I would hang out with her, my parents denied me and basically told me that I was a disappointment, and told me that I needed to stop hanging out with her because people would judge me and people would view me differently. And this is coming from the same people who have told me to not care what people think of me, or that it shouldn't bother me, and it shouldn't affect the way I do things because of what people think. So even knowing that, I know sometimes I can't trust my parents if knowing the truth of who I really am, and I have to hide a lot of things. But knowing all of that, those are just struggles that I constantly have to face, and those have to do nothing with any like financial issues. Living wise, I've lived a pretty comfortable life. I've had a stable home, never had to leave the house, or never have to worry about where I'm going to sleep the next day, because we've always had a roof over our head. Of course, we never knew if we were going to have electricity or if we were going to have water running, because that's a whole different other situation of running short on bills and not being able to pay the electricity bill for a month. But as long as we had a roof over our head and we had food on the table, we were fine. And that's how I've always lived my life, you know. It doesn't matter if I have all the accessories of having a TV or having a computer, as long as I have a roof over my head and food on the table, you know, I'm fine, you know. So when people say that I'm in financial need, sometimes it's hard for me to actually see that until I get somewhere and I find out I don't have enough money, which in most cases is true, but it's just a reality. So my working situation is pretty complex, as you can see. I started officially working when I was at the age of 5. At the age of 5, my parents owned a grocery store in a even smaller town named Granger, which is about 30 minutes away from Yakima. So we had to commute from Yakima to Granger every single day, back and forth. And since we were the owners of the place, we didn't have any employees. The only employees were my mom, my dad, me, and my brother. So between us 4, we had to run this business. And at the age of 5, I started to clean. Obviously, when you're 5 years old, you can't do much, but you do learn a lot. Based off the store, my math skills were pretty good, just because I had to cash out a lot of customers. I had to put labels on everything, prices. I was more of a stalker, so I would stock the shelves. I would mop the floors, do all that stuff. Of course, under the table, because you can't register a 5-year-old in the system. As I got older, I got more involved into the store. I started taking care more of the cash, as a cashier, as a clerk. Started working in the kitchen, and that's when I started learning to cook. So by the age of 10, I was making dishes for customers on the outside, and at the age of 10, I found myself lost. You can't say lost, but I would compare myself to other kids my age, I just didn't understand why I couldn't go outside and play, or why couldn't I go and have fun. The reason why, well, we had a store, I had to work, and so that's always been something that's then. Later, when my parents got their nightclub, my dad doesn't know much about technology, so about a couple years back, I started DJing for him. Of course, I can't legally be inside the building, so I would spend my weekends mixing music for them, or sometimes it would take me a whole week because I'd have to come up with music for 2 nights, and just have my dad be able to press a play button and have this music being going. So I had that DJ experience, which I never really thought of having DJ experience, but now that I reflect on it, that's another form of work. When I was 15, my parents got into a conflict where my dad was committing adultery. Well, he was basically cheating on my mom. When this happened, our business decided to tank. I don't know if the correlation of my parents not taking care of the business had to do with anything, but at that time, we started to lose the store. So in order for us to not completely lose the building, my parents decided to close down the grocery store and rent off the business. When all this happened, I was about 15 and a half. So legally, I was able to work. Once we had closed everything down, I was only a couple months away from being 16 and finding a job. My parents would always pressure me of getting a job, but they had also told me to focus on my studies. So I, being a high schooler, I didn't want to work. I wanted to have the high school experience. I wanted to hang out with friends, go to football games, live what they call the high school experience. And I quickly learned that was not going to be the case. Once I turned 16, I was forced to apply for a job. Out of spite and out of rebellious, or out of all that, I wanted to get my parents off my back about applying for a job. So what I did is I applied for the nearest McDonald's. Did not take the application seriously. I thought I was, just applying just to, cool things down. But to my surprise, I got the job. So at the age of 16, I started to work. I had no car to go to work. My parents had to take me all the time because my parents didn't trust me to drive. Even though my brother started to drive at the age of 15, I was not allowed to be behind the wheel. Being a girl again, they thought I was going to run off with a guy, or run off to do all these other things. So I wasn't trusted to drive. So I started working. I worked an average, you can say an average of 30 hours a week during the school. Had my 40+ hours during the summer. So in a whole year, I made about $10,000, but I didn't see any of it. Every time I would get paid, I'd get paid every 2 weeks. My paychecks would go to my parents. For them, they were in need and they needed the money. Of course, at first, I didn't understand why. It was my money, I was working hard for it. So at first, it would bother me, but I had to basically suck it up. I had to deal with it. I had to give them the money because they were my parents. They had raised me for 16+ years. they had all the right to what I was making. So I gave them the money, and that's how it kept going. And so I've been working at McDonald's for 3 years. I say I am because I am currently still an employee. I am just taking a leave of absence. So whenever I have a break here and I go back to Yakima, I can go back and I can work for them. During my senior year, I needed to cover a lot of other expenses, like during graduation. I had to pay my cap and gown, so I had to find other sources of getting income without my parents knowing. Because of this, I started going into photography. I would do senior pictures and of my friends and just charge them about $40 a person. So that's how I was able to pay for my cap and gown and all my graduation expenses. After that, also I had to pay off my cars. I say cars because at the time I was paying for 2 different cars. I was paying for a car that my brother was using and the car I was currently driving. But that's a whole other situation. So even though I've had all these struggles, or I've had all these obstacles I've had to go through, it hasn't stopped me where I want to go. I'm currently a student at the University of Washington in Seattle, and I'm an incoming freshman, and I'm really excited. I'm really excited to be there. Don't see myself going in any other school. But during the application process, I did have a lot of found emotions. During my application process, I had to go through a whole long application that I did not think it was going to be so long. I knew what I had to do. I knew what I had to put on the application to get accepted, but I just didn't know it was going to affect me the way it had. So the biggest part of the application was the personal statement and the cultural statement. When I found out I couldn't write a personal statement just on the first blow, I decided to write just whatever would come to my mind. So what I did, I sat down one night and I started typing what you say, my life story. For a person like me, I've always been taught of not telling anybody of, I've been told not to tell your problems. Whatever the problems are, stay within the family and don't go anywhere else. So you're not to speak of what's going on. You're not supposed to say anything. You just stay quiet and go day by day. So having to physically write a paper, having to do with you and having to do with your struggles, it was kind of hard for me. So when I sat down and I wrote this personal statement, I didn't know what I was writing. So what I ended up with was a 15-page personal statement of who I was, or at least who I thought I was. When I broke it down, I found out I was writing in two different ways, which was one the cultural and one the personal. I need to sit down with someone to show me what personal statement I should, what key points of that personal statement I should use and what should go into my cultural essay. So I ended up with a personal statement having to do with my family basically, of how I had to go through them comparing me to my brother and how I'm legal and the stereotypes that the discrimination that they gave me, and how at the age of 5 I had to learn how to cook, I had to learn how to clean and take care of my baby sister when I was only at the age of 9. Without knowing, I had no childhood. I was quickly on my path to adulthood without even knowing. So that was mostly my personal statement, and how the fear of one day coming home and finding my parents not being there because they might be deported was another big part of it. Because that's an everyday fear that a lot of people don't know, that people go through. They might be all happy and might have no worry in the world, but behind their head, they're worried to go home because they don't know if someone's going to knock on their door and tell them that they have to go back to their country that they haven't seen in 20 years. So knowing that my own country can take my parents away to a country that they basically don't know anymore was hard for me. And that was something that I had to fight for, that I have to show them that I have to get to a certain place in order to protect them. Because even though they're supposed to be protecting me, in a way, I have to protect them. My cultural statement had to do with a lot of how my parents thought I was gay and how I couldn't find myself within a society which compares you. And all of this made me reflect of where I really want to be and who I really am. Growing up in Yakima, it's a really conservative place. You can't do anything without someone judging you. So I was able to find out that I didn't really know who I was. If I was in Yakima, I have to hide. I have to show them someone I'm not. And that's something I have to do in order to keep my parents happy, which is something I'm not proud of, but something that I have to do. All of this mostly comes, even all of this struggles basically end up to one thing, is getting the approval of your family. For me, the biggest thing, it doesn't matter where I end up, I always wanted the approval of my mother. My mother was always the one who told me, you know, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to go where you want to go. But she was the same person who would come up to me and tell me that I was a disappointment, that I wasn't going to lead anywhere, that I should just quit now and just stop. So getting the approval from my mother was the biggest thing in the world for me. So when I got the acceptance letter in the mail of UW, I didn't know how to feel. I was excited to know that I was in the school of my dreams and I was going to be off the way I wanted to be. But I didn't know how she was going to react. When I told her so, she was excited in a way, but I could also see the sadness in her eyes. At first I didn't know if it was sadness of me going away or if it was because she knew that I was going to come to a city not going to know anyone and that I was just going to go back. Later I found out that that was the reason. She thought that I was going to come into a place that I had no idea what I was going to do, and I was just going to end up like my brother, drop out of school and go back to Yakima. So that's something I have to face every day and hope that I don't prove her right. And it's hard because I've known that, I've seen that I'm not fully prepared to go to this school. I'm not as fully prepared as other students, and I don't know how to compete with students like that. But I do know I have the willpower. I know that I can apply myself enough to put myself at their level. And that's something I take to as an advantage. Because I've learned that I have to sit down, I'm glad I've learned that, because I wouldn't want to learn that halfway through the years and know that I have to drop out because I don't meet the requirements or I'm just not smart enough. So at the age of 19, I found my own house. I live in a house with 6 other people, and it's okay. In a house with 6 other people that I consider my friends. I'm stable, and I know that I can accomplish anything I want. So for a 1-year plan, you know, all I really can say is I have to survive. I have to be able to survive all the statistics of people getting taken out of classes or dropping out of what they want their intended major because it's too hard. So the main focus for this year is to survive, is to be able to pass my classes, get a decent grade. I know I might not be able to ace all my classes, but as long as I get my decent grades and I keep my scholarships, I'm fine. I know I've made peace. I might not graduate in 4 years. That might take me 5, but it's fine, you know. As long as I graduate and as long as I get to where I want to be, for me it doesn't matter if it takes me 10 years to graduate. In 5 years, what my plan is, I want to be in medical school. I want to be on my way to getting my MD and being able to go back to Yakima. Because in reality, my final goal is to go back to Yakima and to show everybody that no matter what they thought of me or whatever, or no matter what they told me, I went against their will and did what I wanted to do and be where I wanted to be. I want to go back to Yakima and show kids that no matter that we're from the valley, it doesn't matter that we go to public school, that we can go where we wanted to be and we can accomplish whatever we want to be. It doesn't matter what system of education we go through. It doesn't matter the struggles we've gone through or what block you live in. As long as you have the willpower to do it, you'll find your resources and you'll find where you want to go. I say that because within high school I've had some horrible experiences. For example, when I got Yakima's biggest scholarship, was a $30,000 scholarship, I was told by my librarian, Mrs. Green, that I was basically, there was no reason for me to get that scholarship, in other words. Of course, she physically didn't say that, but from her body language, I could tell. You know, when I went into the library one day and one of my classmates congratulated me of getting the scholarship, she came up to me and she told me of who had gotten the Monroe Scholarship, which was the name of the scholarship. She told me, she asked, she was like, "Oh, did I hear someone got the Monroe Scholarship?" And I told her, yes, that I did. And I was super excited, you know. And when I told her and she figured out that it was me, she looked me down. And then she asked, she was like, "Do you mind if I ask what your SAT scores and your SAT scores were?" At the time I was confused and I didn't know why she wanted to know my SAT scores. So I told her, and I told her that I explained that I did not have the greatest scores in the world, and I told her that I had gotten a 1380 on my SAT scores and an 18 on my ACT. At that time when I told her, she looked at me and then she said, "What's your GPA?" And I told her that I had 3.5. And right when I told her I had a 3.5, she nodded her head and she's like, "Oh, so you're going to go to community college. You're going to go to YVCC, aren't you?" And I was, at the time I didn't know if I was mad or if I was confused, because she had basically told me that based off my SAT scores and based off my GPA, she exactly knew where I was going to go. And so I took pride and I told her, I was like, no, I was like, I'm going to go to I was going to go to UW. I was going to go to the University of Washington. When I said that, she stepped back a bit. She looked from me from head to toe, and she said, "Oh, you must have a lot of extracurricular activities." Basically telling me that based on my involvement in school was because of why I got in. This is coming from the same person who had told me earlier in the year that I was not a true bilingual. And it's people like that who I've found that will of having to fight for who I am, and having to fight of no matter what people say or what people think, I'm going to be who I want to be. And it doesn't matter if it bothers them that I'm saying this, but I will prove them wrong, and I'll get to where I want to be no matter what. Okay. We're good.
You're done?
Yeah.
So how do you think it went?
It went good. It flowed more.
Yeah.